Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
PD Beats here from Popternative, speaking to Ivan Shaw about some of his most recent projects, including The Cleaning Lady and The Dirty Black Bag. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I mean, you made it tough for me. I mean, usually people come on the show, they talk maybe like about one project, right? You got two recent projects, Ivan. Like, come on.
Yeah, no, it's been the world has been kind to me. It's been nice.
Do you prepare yourself for that, where you kind of go in, you work on projects, and then you're kind of playing the waiting game, and then, oh, look, like two projects are kind of coming out pretty close. Like, you can't really plan for that, but I guess there's kind of maybe a feeling with like not knowing when.
Yeah, there was something a little bit magical about how this all worked out, because we shot the pilot of The Cleaning Lady first, and then you have to do that waiting period with the network to see if you get picked up, and then in between that, I happened to start Dirty Black Bag, and I shot all of Dirty Black Bag before I came back, and then before it got picked up, The Cleaning Lady got picked up. So then it worked out actually perfectly.
Yeah.
Year.
No, absolutely. You've been doing this for quite some time. You've been working on projects as a storyteller for quite some time. So I'm sure you get used to it. But what I'm noticing, Ivan, is there seems to be kind of like a whole, like different waves in terms of like a show like coming out. You know what I mean? Like I remember The Cleaning Lady, there was like the announcements about who was casted for it. And then there was, the trailer and then the release date, right? It was like different kind of streams and different kind of waves of like hyping a show out. And I'm just curious what you think of that kind of, as an actor, basically kind of having to deal with all of that. Like there's all these like flows of like getting a show out. I feel like it's pretty crazy.
I think, yeah, and I think it's been different recently just because of the pandemic. So I think there's been what you're talking about, those waves, there's kind of these starts and stops. And I think that's just been the nature of production during COVID. So that's been very difficult. And I think in my position, you just have to require a lot of patience and just kind of hope for the best. And yeah, you just kind of put your head down and do your work, and then you just leave it at that. You can't really predict what the forces are going to dictate in terms of, what gets picked up and what
there definitely is a misconception where people think that, the actor as a storyteller is basically like know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, exactly. We know very little. Most of the time I'm texting my manager going, anything? Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Well, no, because I remember so I'm curious about this then. Like release date, I guess it's maybe because of social media, like you just said, but like the release date announcement of like a show or movie is like the biggest thing now, I feel like. Even without like a trailer, like just the announcement of a show, people or a movie, people like lose their minds off it. I find that very interesting.
I mean, in the ideal scenario, yes, people will lose their mind over just the announcement. I mean, that's I think The Cleaning Lady did that very well, where they had like the Super Bowl, they were pumping it up so much right before, and then fortunately it stepped up to what people were expecting.
The Cleaning Lady is just a show that has so many dynamic, complex characters, and I'm just curious because it focuses on specific characters and that are kind of the focal point of the stories, but there's a lot of kind of secondary characters as well, Ivan, that kind of come and play, and they're very complex, and they're not made that clear cut in terms of their motives and a lot of their backstory. So I'm just curious, do you notice that on a show like that? There's a lot of complex characters on The Cleaning Lady.
Well, I will say that's one of the most impressive things very early on when I signed on to the project, because I have very little to do in the first episode. So you never know how these things are going to go if you're just going to be kind of chucked off to the side. But what was brought to my attention very early on is that my character had a very specific arc, and he was filled with a lot of complexities, and that was very exciting for me to play. And you're right about that. They did take the time to flesh out every single character, which doesn't happen in a lot of shows.
Doesn't happen in a lot of shows. It doesn't even even with a movie, like so many movies I've watched where they're like an hour and a half, and you kind of blink, and it's like I would love to learn a little bit more about this character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is interesting. Spaghetti Western. I mean, the Western, like when a show or a movie of the Western genre comes out, they hit hard. and people love them and people watch them. So I'm just curious, generally, with what I just said, how does it feel to be part of the Dirty Black Bag, knowing that when these westerns come out, they hit pretty hard, Ivan?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. It's one of those things where people have such an intimate relationship to, and that comes with a lot of pressure in and of itself. And I think there are a whole wave of westerns coming out right now, and I think we were certainly trying to do something very interesting with ours, and it does come with a lot of excitement, a lot of pressure, and it's highly, highly anticipated. So it is a very interesting position to be in, because typically when you look like me, you don't get invited to the spaghetti western genre. So for me, it was very exciting not only to step into this role, but also try to take a very big swing and do something interesting with the character, and try to play with these guys that are very familiar with that.
Now
world.
that's going to be streaming, I believe, on AMC Plus.
Yeah.
And that's the new streaming service for AMC, and they've had some amazing shows. I don't know if like you get cast for this, you find out it's going to be on AMC Plus and everything, but like they have kind of announced, because it's a newer thing, their streaming service. They had a show called Kin with Charlie Cox that was like one of the best shows I've ever seen. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. And then like I like that, because that comes out and it's like, okay, cool. Like, what else do you have? What else do you got? AMC Plus, right? And it's like Dirty Black Bag and everything. So is that an exciting thing for you as well? Kind of being part of a show, which is kind of part of like a newer streaming service in a lot of ways too. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be launched with the launch of the platform is a very special thing. It's something that I've never experienced before.
Yeah.
So hopefully it finds its audience and people really love it, and it does really good things for them.
Before we started the official interview, we kind of did the 2-minute kind of pre-interview, I guess. Some of those, and we talked about horror movies, and we talked about a psychological horror movie that you did that I really enjoyed with Madison Eisman and Sydney Sweeney called Nocturne. And I was a huge fan of that. And we talked about it before we started. The horror genre has kind of evolved, has exploded. But all these kind of like psychological horror movies came out at a time right before lockdown, like you said, and Nocturne was one of them. So what's it like being part of the genre kind of at its like peak where it's really kind of took off? Because it was part of like a big crop of movies that people always talk about now.
Yeah, it was interesting because it wasn't something that I had done a whole lot of.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting thing to step into stylistically as an actor, but also what you're speaking to just in the genre as a whole. And I think Nocturne had a very interesting timing of it, because it was kind of like we were all living through our own horror movies in life. It was
people are scary. The world is scary.
The world is a very scary place, and there was no other time to articulate that than right then at the beginning of lockdown. So I think it found a very interesting niche crowd about it, and it was certainly something very very unique for me to experience.
I find that one, it's not like the scariest movie. Like there's some scary moments, but the concept of that one is really like makes you like very uncomfortable. Like that. Like,
yeah. I do think it's a lot more of a psychological thriller than it is a straight horror film.
Yeah, but again, I feel like it was marketed as like a horror because of what the genre is doing now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it was a Blumhouse film, was it not?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was a part of that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like, Blumhouse has become like the cream of the crop of like horror.
Yeah, and why not kind of blend genres if you can?
That was my next question. One of my favorite things about storytelling and content these days, Ivan, is the genre bending. Things are not staying in a box. They're kind of doing their own thing. What do you think about a lot of the genre bending having in TV and film?
I think it's great. I think it's very necessary. I think it's important, and I think it's reflective of society. I think we're learning more and more that people, subgroups, ethnicities, we don't exist in monoliths, and I think it's great to be able to blend storytelling, blend it all, like mix this world up. I think it's a good thing.
I think it's such a weird thing because you mentioned, like, we haven't mentioned like geek culture, comic book culture yet, but like I can compare it to like what I see with the horror movies. Like when I was growing up, I'm a 90s kid, right? I was born in 1991. Like that stuff wasn't like seen as like popular culture. You know what I mean? Like geek culture and like comic book. It was seen as kind of like, oh, you're watching a horror movie, like, oh, you're lame, you know what I mean? Or like,
Yeah.
you know, now you wear like a Spider-Man shirt, you know, you're the most popular kid in school. But like
Yeah.
I would get made fun of. So like that kind of like geek culture, comic book culture, and like the horror culture and the supernatural culture, it's kind of strange to me that it's like popular culture right now.
Yeah. I mean, same here. I grew up where geek culture was geek culture. It wasn't cool by any means.
The
Yeah.
Marvel DC movies are by a landslide like the biggest movies on the planet when they come out.
Huge.
Like
Yeah.
you can't even compare it. Like it's like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
and it's weird if you ask like 16-year-old me this, I'd be like, that's so weird to see
Yeah.
that. No,
Yeah. Yeah. But I would prefer it this way, you know, Revenge of the Nerds, right?
basically those were good movies. You're a storyteller. I talked about that a little bit when I was kind of asking you specific questions. What excites you about storytelling specifically these days?
As a whole, in general.
Yeah, in general, what are things that you enjoy about being a storyteller, Ivan?
Well, I think there are very few things out there where people across the globe have a very, very intimate relationship with,
Mhm.
no matter what. I think, food might be one of them. Maybe alcohol is one of them. I think movies, storytelling, and TV, and now streaming TV, I think that's huge. I think part of every other dinner party out there, people are talking about the thing that they're binge watching. And I think what that does is it provides people, to not to be cheesy about it, but it provides people a little bit of an outlet, maybe to step out of whatever crazy life or crazy world we're all living in for a moment and just be able to experience something different. And sometimes that could be, that could bring people a lot of joy and give them, a fun experience.
It's funny too. A while ago, I asked that question to someone, and they said they were at like a birthday party, and like a 7-year-old came up to them and was just asking, like, "What do you do?" Right? And he was like, "I play pretend for a living."
Yeah.
I feel like that's the best way to explain what acting is, like to
It
like a
is.
younger audience.
It is. It is. It's so ridiculous. It's so absolutely ridiculous. And, you can speak to the profundity of it, like everybody can experience it in their living rooms, or you can just say, "This is ridiculous. I'm standing out in the freezing cold under a fake rain machine right now for how many hours?" And, like,
It's pretty crazy. But I wanted to thank you for taking some time and coming on Popternative to chat about some projects, Ivan. This was great.
yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
So yeah, so Cleaning Lady on Fox,
Yep.
and then you
Fox
got
Central.
the Dirty Black Bag on AMC Plus.
Yep.
So lots happening right now.
What's happening? Yeah.
And where can people follow you on social media to keep update with everything? Instagram?
I'm on Instagram. My handle is at Shawski, SHAWSKI, is the probably the only nickname I've ever had. And that's about it.
Amazing. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Ivan Shaw and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.